2. Welcome everybody to, one again, Lupin the Third, but don't know where to start. So before we start this panel, I'm asking, you probably have one yourselves, well, why should I even get into Lupin in the first place? After billions of anime out there, why Lupin specifically? Well, because Lupin the Third, the franchise, has great characters, fun, action-packed stories that are totally unpredictable, and while they're primarily heist stories, the franchise stars a bunch of criminals after all. The series isn't afraid to go through several different genres in order to stay fresh, from fantasy to sci-fi, comedy to romance, etc. This franchise also influenced a ton of anime. Cowboy Bebop and Fooly Cooly owe a lot of their existences to Lupin the Third. And it's also just a very fun and funny franchise that takes great advantage of being animated to deliver some wacky scenarios. Plus, it has a fantastic soundtrack by Yuji Ono that combines jazz and funk to great success. But let's start from the beginning. Once upon a time, there was a man named Kazuhiko Kato, aka Monkey Punch. Born in 1937 and having sadly passed away in 2019 from pneumonia, Monkey Punch found an interest in drawing manga since he was a teenager, having drawn several newspaper comics during his time in college. But sometime in the 60s, he was brought in to pitch a new manga series for Seiya magazine Manga Action. Thinking he'll never get an opportunity like this ever again, Monkey Punch came up with the idea for Lupin the Third off the top of his head. It was claimed by his agent that it would last for about 3 months. Let's just say it lasted a bit longer than 3 months. For Lupin, Monkey Punch took heavy inspiration from James Bond, Mad Magazine, and most importantly, Arsène Lupin. Now, who's Arsène Lupin? This guy is. Arsène Lupin was the quintessential gentleman thief, a suave rogue who steals from the rich and looks cool doing it, having started a long-running series of French novels. Created by Maurice Leblanc, Lupin debuted in 1905 and continued up until Leblanc's death in 1941. Lupin remained super popular and influential in Japan, continuing to inspire countless thieves of the gentleman and phantom variety. So Monkey Punch took the stories of Arsène Lupin, and basically thought, what if the great thief had a grandson who continued his grandfather's legacy? And before he asked, not much is known about Lupin II. He doesn't really matter. Speaking of which, let's talk about characters. There are 5 recurring characters across the entire franchise, so let's briefly go over them, shall we? First up is Arsène Lupin III, the titular thief himself. Lupin is the goofy, half-Japanese, half-French grandson of legendary thief Arsène Lupin. Seeking to carry out his grandfather's legacy, and because of a thrill seeker who just wants to have some fun, Lupin is characterized as a dedicated strategist who tackles the most impossible heist imaginable. And while he has his vices, like his often perverted antics and willingness to kill some criminals who stand in his way, Lupin has a heart of gold that shines in his good-hearted nature for his friends and willingness to help those in need. But don't let his looks and wacky personality fool you. Behind that monkey-shaped head and goofy exterior lies a brilliant mind. Because Lupin's a master manipulator who can trick even the most arrogant and intelligent of opponents. And when caught in a jam, he'll just pull an item out from his jacket that will conveniently save him. Say he gets suddenly handcuffed by some police. Don't worry, that was just a fake hand. You can just slip on out, no problem. Falling from the sky, don't worry, he has a parachute with hands, and there you go. And despite the fact that some people think, oh, that shit's bad, right, and he can get out of anything. No, you accept that, because he is the world's greatest thief, a title he has rightfully earned in his decades-long career. But what's a thief without some help? After all, Lupin can't do all this alone. He needs someone to help him. And one couldn't get a partner as amazing as Daisuke Jigen. Daisuke Jigen is Lupin's best friend, basically his life partner who will do anything he can to help Lupin in his heist. Yeah, they agree. Inspired by Hollywood actor James Coburn, who spent the 1960s playing badass gunslingers like in Magnificent Seven, Jigen is an aging gangster who retired from the business to assist Lupin. Very wry and laid back, with dry personality and sense of humor, Jigen proved himself an expert on every kind of firearm you can imagine, and is an amazing shot, completely capable of hitting any type of target, no matter how impossibly far away they are. We're talking shooting at a speeding bullet, to shooting off the nuts on a highway sign while driving backwards. But behind that rough, crafty exterior, Jigen's also a very smart guy, capable of going behind Lupin's back to settle personal scores. From faking his death to protect the little girl, to stopping a mob boss by dodging incoming bullets that end up killing every gunman surrounding him. But while Jigen's made up long-range combat, our next character excels at short-range combat, Goemon Ishikawa the 13th. Goemon is a descendant of Goemon Ishikawa, a samurai of Japanese legend who was basically the equivalent of Robin Hood. Goemon himself takes up his ancestors' behavior and teachings by acting as a rather stoic but no less intelligent and honorable warrior. A brilliant assassin, Goemon uses both his wits and his skills as a samurai to slice everything in his path, because he's never seen those cherished Zen-Tetskin, a katana able to cut through anything, and I mean anything. Bullets, helicopters, rocks, clothes, buildings, you name it, it'll slice clean through. Now, interestingly, Goemon was originally a villain who was sent to kill Lupin, but after the duel ended in a tie, Goemon decided to befriend Lupin and form a partnership with him. Goemon was essentially created by Monkey Punch to add some Japanese elements into what he saw was a Western flavored series. But for every crime game, there's always a snake in the grass, and that's where Fujiko Mina gets involved. Fujiko is Lupin's on-again, off-again girlfriend, who primarily acts as the franchise's wild card, capable of siding with either Lupin or the villains, depending on who pays her better. As a result, she's wildly unpredictable, and often gets away with the real treasure while Lupin and the villains are distracted. But more importantly, Fujiko is basically Lupin's equal in terms of intelligence and audaciousness, coming up with crazy schemes of her own to get what she wants. But compared to Lupin, Fujiko is more willing to kill people who stand in her way, rather than humiliate them like Lupin does, and she's a capable fighter on her own, while using her several disguises, and even her own sexual charm to get what she wants. Though whether or not she gets away with the treasure depends on who she's siding with. But every criminal needs a cop, and that's where Koichi Zenigata comes in. Zenigata is an officer for Interpol tasked with arresting Lupin. Throughout the franchise, Zenigata acts as the Tom of Lupin's jury, doing whatever he can to trap Lupin, only to fail each and every single time. And man, he can never catch a break, because as soon as Lupin's arrested, we'll just concoct some scheme to escape pretty easily, off by tricking Zenigata. But no matter what, Zenigata never stops, having dedicated his entire life to tracking Lupin down and apprehending him. And despite his shortcomings, Zenigata has shown on several occasions that he can be quite clever and badass in his own right, especially when he's fighting against other criminals. He's shown to be as smart as Lupin once in a while, but unfortunately he's going after the world's greatest thief, so it's a bit of a struggle. And interestingly, Zenigata actually does show care for Lupin on rare occasions, hinting that despite his passion for arresting him, Zenigata does not want the game to end. And when the chips are down and the worst threat emerges, Zenigata will criticize differences to help Lupin take out the bigger threat. But after that, it's right back to chasing him. So to summarize, we have 5 characters from across 55 years of media, all of whom are unpredictable, have big enough backstories and character archetypes to make them simple yet endearing, and are willing to betray each other to suit their personal goals. All of this makes for a wild and unpredictable experience of guessing what each character is going to do next. Twists and turns the name of the game for Lupin. So with all this backstory out of the way, let's start from the very beginning. The manga. The original, the source itself. Lupin made his self-titled debut in 1967 in manga action, which ended in 1972. With an art style that resembles the crude, exaggerated caricatures of Mad Magazine than any manga before or after it, the manga follows Lupin's game as they steal and kill to get the treasure they so desire. It's very episodic storytelling. The manga was very successful upon release. There were launched a wide variety of sequel and spin-off mangas. The original series was translated by Tokyopop in 2002, but sadly none of the other manga have been translated due to poor sales of the sequel manga series. Now this is the part of the panel why we I talk a bit about the movie or the show or manga or whatever, and then I tell you guys if I recommend it all. If you can skip it, I recommend go through and whatnot. So, now I've got that out of the way. Do I recommend you read the original manga? Honestly, not really. The manga was the first of its kind, and it definitely shows. It's very rough, and very tonally different from the rest of the franchise. The manga is very dark, and it has a lot of violence, a lot of sex, a lot of nudity, plus the characterizations for everyone aren't quite finalized yet. I'm hoping that the characters themselves are far more likable here. I know Lupin in the games are criminals, but it's uncomfortable at times. You see, Lupin back then in the manga was, to quote a friend of mine, a comedy rapist who would often sexually assault women and have them play for laughs. While acceptable and very raunchy back then, nowadays it doesn't really scream like a merely mischievous thief. Thankfully, this aspect of him will disappear afterwards. But if you really want to read the original manga, I would highly recommend The Greatest Heist Collection, as it carries some great stories that contain everything awesome about the franchise, none of the stuff that makes it dated. It's a really good read. The stories hold up. Now, at this point in history, Monkey Punch wanted Lupin to get his own anime. I mean, if every other manga got one, why couldn't Lupin? Because of how hard it was to get an anime greenlit, especially for a manga as dark and dull as Lupin was, Monkey Punch took it upon himself to make a pitch for a potential anime. And thus we got Lupin the Third pilot film. In 1967, animation studio TMS created a short pilot meant to get funding for a potential Lupin movie. The pilot's about 12 minutes and mainly focuses on character descriptions and backstories. It has more lighter tone compared to the manga, and some big differences, like how Goemon's a bad guy here, and Zenigata has a mentor who never shows up again. But the ultimate question of if Lupin can work in animation was thankfully answered with a resounding yes. While it wasn't made into a movie, Lupin would end up getting his own anime series 2 years later. Yeah, bring excitement. That's exactly what I was doing. So let's get started, y'all, because it's Lupin Part 1, which first aired in 1971. Animated and produced by TMS Animation, who are going to handle the majority of the franchise. Part 1 made history as the first anime on TV aimed at adults. The series itself is mainly episodic, often involving Lupin and company committing a different heist of the week throughout Japan. But some episodes take place in other parts of the world, like Italy. Despite everything, the anime is well known at the time for its troubled production. Being the first adult anime on TV meant it attracted some controversy for its then unseen level of violence and bleaker tone, mainly from conservative moral guardians, as always. Series director Masaki Osumi was also fired after production of episode 7 wrapped. Bless you. Yeah, the original showrunner was fired due to disliking the show's direction. He was swapped out as showrunner for 2 TMS animators and writers. You might have heard their names before. They were Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata. Yep, before Ghibli, these two worked at TMS as budding artists and soon directors of Lupin. Anyways, under Miyazaki and Takahata's direction, the show went through a bit of a retool. For instance, the tone became more lighthearted, as Lupin and the game were a lot less selfish and often used tricks and manipulation to defeat their opponents rather than simple violence. Fujiko became more willing to work with Lupin rather than hinder him, and Zenigata made more appearances to provide the show's comic relief. But despite the massive retool, the show was still a flop of ratings, and was cancelled after 23 episodes, making it the shortest Lupin series. But the show would eventually do well on reruns, mainly because TV channels found it was cheaper to broadcast stuff like this as filler for local channels. Thus, Lupin found a new home in animation, and was seen as a worthy series in the eyes of TMS. And do I recommend Part 1? Somewhat. While the show as a whole was easy to sit through compared to the manga, mainly because the main characters are far less unscrupulous and unlikable, the tone and feel of the pre-Miyazaki and Takahata episodes feel uneven and at odds with what the franchise would eventually become known for, despite having some moments of their own. Ultimately, the retool was for the better, as everything past episode 7 starts getting more ambitious, with its increasing dramatic storytelling, better pacing, animation techniques, and characterizations. That said, I don't think this should be your first Lupin series, as the franchise improves greatly after Part 1. Though if you do want to watch it, be warned, the first few episodes are going to be a bit weird. Part 1 can be watched through Crunchyroll, Amazon Prime, HiDive, and even Tubi. And also just going to say that everything on this panel you see can be found on DVD through Discotheque, Part 1 included. So I'm not going to say like, we can find us on DVD. Discotheque, baby. Discotheque are the saviors of the Lupin franchise. They're the reason why it's so well known in America. They're the real heroes here. But because of his eventual success, Lupin will get his first movie a few years later. Can you guys guess what that movie was?
く見るととんでもないことになるぞ。ベッドの下にはな、3000億円という金塊のスイス銀行発行の預かり証が隠してあるんだよ。それはな、ルパン帝国最後の隠し金なんだよ。
Yes, your eyes don't deceive you. The first ever Lupin movie was Lupin the Third, Strange Psychokinetic Strategy. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Released in 1974, SPS was an incredibly comedic adaptation of the manga that is super, unapologetically 70s cheese. While plot and tone heavily rooted in wacky slapstick, the movie feels very different from the rest of the franchise at this point. It feels more like a cartoon than the actual cartoon. Taking most of its inspiration from the original manga, Lupin here is the son of a crime lord, Lupin II, and applies a farce that involves Jigen and others trying to get Lupin to carry out his game's legacy by stealing stuff. Also, Goemon doesn't make an appearance. I guess he was too awesome for the big screen. Do I recommend this movie? Well, if it wasn't obvious enough, no. It's just so different from the source material that I can't recommend it to newcomers who want to get into the franchise. But that said, if you're a fan of Benny Hill, Naked Gun, or even the Looney Tunes, this one's for you. Some of the slapstick is pretty funny. Like, there's a point where Zenigata gets like slammed against the wall, and it becomes like a flat cardboard, falls down. And some of the jokes do work, but at best, this movie is just a curiosity. I mean, it was the first Lupin movie they ever made. They didn't know what they were doing. But luckily, this movie did not stop the franchise, as 3 years later, Lupin will make his grand return to animation. Yeah, even they like it. Alright, Lupin, Part 2, aka Red Jacket, since Lupin's jacket changed color between series. Airing from 1977 to 1980, Part 2 was episodic like Episode 1. This time involved Lupin gaining traveling the entire world, committing a wide variety of heists in several different countries. From stealing soccer money in Brazil, to stealing diamonds from a South African mine, to fighting Nazis in Germany to steal their gold, the story possibilities were endless. The show is also more lighthearted, outlandish, and creative compared to Part 1, which was a necessity. Because you see, TMS decided to do something interesting with Part 2. They decided to make it an open-ended series, which basically meant a new episode every single week. And just to remind you guys, Part 2 lasted 3 years. 3 years of non-stop Lupin action, with only 3 breaks in between to the holidays. Woo! 155 episodes! Yeah, Part 2 is comprised of over 155 episodes. Quite a lot. Unlike Part 1, Part 2 was a hit in ratings and catapulted Lupin to anime stardom. Now, in the early 2000s, distribution company Pioneer were actually able to dub Part 2 and air on Cartoon Network's then new Adult Swim block. But not only would the show be canceled due to poor ratings, the dub itself remained incomplete, stopping at episode 79. This is primarily due to Pioneer's financial problems that would eventually lead to the bankruptcy. Do I recommend Part 2? Oh, absolutely I recommend it, but not all of it. Part 2 helps establish a lighter, more comedic and adventurous tone that will become the base standard for the rest of the Lupin franchise. And the characters here are refined to perfection. I wouldn't recommend watching the entire show, as it's basically the equivalent of eating 155 bags of potato chips in a row. Pick and choose, basically. There's a lot of really good ones. And again, there's no real continuity, there's no overarching story. Part 2 can be watched on Crunchyroll, High Dive, and Tubi. Plus, some episodes subbed and dubbed are on TMS's official YouTube account. But during Part 2's run, TMS decided to give Lupin more movies, this time animated. We got 2 animated movies during Part 2's run. The first one being The Mystery of Mamo. Released in 1978, Mystery of Mama marks Lupin's first ever animated movie. And as such, the movie's plotted on a larger scale, with Lupin tackling an all-powerful villain, the titular Mamo, with the fate of the entire world on the line. The art style of the movie leans more closely to the widely proportioned character designs of the manga, while the movie's tone is more similar to Part 1's, with a darker, moodier, and surreal nature, with the occasional spurts of goofy, outlandish, and dark comedy. And without getting into spoilers, the movie leans heavily on sci-fi, making it stand out from everything else prior. And do I recommend Mamo? Yes, I do. Mystery of Mamo perfectly establishes the franchise's underlying theme of adult humor, action, and mystery. Plus, it's just a very funny movie that takes great chances to make it as cinematic as possible. It paid off. To the point where if you want to start somewhere with Lupin, honestly, this movie would be the place to start. It's really good. The movie can be watched on Prime Instant Video as a purchase or rental. And believe it or not, it can be found for free, dubbed, on Team Ed's official YouTube channel. So if you're curious about Mamo and want to watch it, it's there for free. Okay, but speaking of dubs, a little fun fact about Mamo, it has not one, not two, not three, but 4 English dubs. 4! As of today, Mamo is one of the most dubbed English anime in history, not counting the lost episodes of Dragon Ball Episode 1. All the dubs can be found on a Discotheque Blu-ray release, including the sub version. Now, are the dubs worth watching? Well, let's take it from the top. We have the 1979 Toho dub, comprised of random English speakers found in Japan and meant to be shown on Japanese airlines, has very faithful Japanese scripts, and by that I mean the performances and dialogue are exalted. For some reason, everybody but Lupin has different names. Jigen's now Dan Dunn, Goremon's now the Samurai, Fujiko's now Margot, and Zenigata's now Detective Ed Scott. The 1995 streamlined dub, made to give the movie a proper English release, has goofier voice acting and an altered script, but it has its moments. They agree. Plus, everybody's names are back to normal, so that's good. We got the 1996 manga UK dub, which is only made for the PAL market in England. It has a script based on a Toho dub, but Lupin's name is changed to Wolf due to copyright issues with the Lupin estate. So here's Zenigata go like, Wolf! Nice try, Wolf. You can get away from me, Wolf! The LeBlanc estate, the Maurice LeBlanc estate. And finally, we have the 2003 Pioneer dub, which is comprised of the same cast as the Part 2 dub, and is the best one in my opinion. It has very funny jokes, and way better acting and writing. It's not the most accurate to the original script, but the spirit of the movie is still there. And given how Team S seems to favor it over the previous dubs, it's this version that's on their YouTube channel. It's likely the canon dub. But after Mamo's release came a game changer for the rest of the franchise next year. And you guys know what I'm talking about. The Castle of Cagliostro. Released in 1979, Cagliostro marked Hayao Miyazaki's first directed movie after directing numerous TV shows. Now, what can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said by animation historians and critics? The movie is considered a classic by many, with its more simplistic yet solid story, having the best animation in the franchise, and being an interesting take on the Lupin formula. Which is funny considering that when it came out in Japan, it was a big flop at the box office, especially compared to the success of Mamo. But it wasn't until fan-translated copies of the movie got passed around in the 80s in North America and beyond when people were able to discover it, leading to tons of animated movies paying tribute to it. Like, seriously, every time you see a clock tower fight in an animated movie show, you can think Cagliostro. So, yeah, Great Mouse Detective, Batman animated series, all that was heavily inspired by Cagliostro. Do I recommend Cagliostro? Yes, I do. But with the warning that Cagliostro is totally different from the rest of the franchise. Don't get me wrong, the story and animation are all fantastic, some of the best out there. But the characters here are more altruistic and aren't as villainous as most installments. Yeah, not much villainous. This is also the most lighthearted story in the franchise, with nothing in the way of serious murder, nudity, or violence. Compared to Mamo, it's a Disney movie, which makes sense given Miyazaki's direction. But all that said, this is a great movie to start with, alongside Mamo. Now, like Mamo, the movie can be found on Prime Instant Video, either rented or purchased. Also like Mamo, Cagliostro received several English dubs, 2 this time. To quickly cover those for a bit, the 1991 streamlined dub, recorded before their Mamo dub, is very dated. The acting's corny, the script's poorly translated, Lupin's name is changed to Wolf, like the manga K dub of Mamo, in order to avoid conflict with the LeBlanc estate, and some of the characters behave differently. And then there's the 2000 anime's manga K dub. It's definitely better than the streamlined dub. It even has the bonus of having Solid Snake himself, David Hayter, as the voice of Lupin. But if you ask me, the original sub version is the way to go, as later releases would fix a plot important translation issue that plagues both dubs. Without getting into it, without getting spoilers, it involves goats. And that's all I'll say. Besides, the most common dub out there is the streamlined dub, since that's one of Prime Instant, and I don't recommend that one. Now, despite its reputation, Cat Ghost was not Lupin's first appearance in the United States. Oh no, Lupin's big grand American debut came in the form of Cliffhanger. Cliffhanger was an arcade game from 1983, developed by Stern Electronics to capitalize off the success of Dragon Slayer. Serving as Lupin's big grand American debut, Cliffhanger is comprised entirely of footage from Mamo and Cagliostro, all stitched together and rewritten to make a different story. It's basically an interactive movie, which was the norm for arcade games at the time. Lupin here was renamed the Cliff, who seeks to free Princess Clarissa from the evil Count Draco. Random encounters and fight scenes ensue. Now what's the game like? Well, all of this video I made to explain itself.
Ever played Dragon Slayer? Well, that's because it's basically the same game. You watch a movie play out and you're told that the corresponding button will move the control stick in a certain direction. Follow these prompts and you'll move on. Mess up one time, and the clip is, well, pain.
Now, do I recommend Cliffhanger? Well, it's a bit obvious, but no. Well, one, there's no real way to play the game, though there are playthroughs on YouTube, which is where I got the footage from. The game itself is ultimately just a novelty, an interesting piece of Lupin lore that isn't really worth looking into. But speaking of which, as we enter the 1980s, Team S decided to grant the decade with another new Lupin anime series. Yes, Lupin Part 3, aka Pink Jacket, aired from 1984 to 1985. It's basically Part 2 again. The Lupin game once again traveling the world, committing more heists. This time, the series gained a far more zanier, wackier art style that emphasized exaggerated designs and angles, like a lot of wrestling cartoons at the time. And again, also make it more similar to the manga's art style. The series as a whole lasted 50 episodes. Do I recommend Part 3? Not really, I don't really think so. If you ask my opinion is, it's just a watered down version of Part 2, with more inconsistent animation, and just not as much creativity. Also, the show's art style is just very jarring compared to everything else in the franchise. And similar to Part 2, Part 3 also spawned a movie in the form of The Legend of the Golden Babylon. Released in 1985, Babylon is the only movie to use Part 3's zany art style in Lupin's Pink Jacket. And it probably has the most fascinating development history of the Lupin movies, having gone through several different directors during pre-production. The first choice to direct the movie would have been Hayao Miyazaki, who passed on a project and working on Nausicaa, and decided to move on from the franchise. The second choice was a pre-Ghost in the Shell Mamoru Oshii, whose plans for the movie would involve Lupin stealing an angel fossil, and eventually all of fiction itself, but he was fired. The final director wound up being Seiji Suzuki, a live-action director of cult crime movies with great titles such as Branded to Kill, Satan's Town, and The Young Breast Duology. Do I recommend Babylon? Kinda. The movie isn't as good as Mamoru Cagliostro. The story's a bit more out there, not much consistency. Things just happen for no real reason. But it does have some nice animation, and the story, despite my complaints, is pretty lighthearted and has its moments of humor. If you at the very least want a good time with not much substance, Babylon will offer that. The movie can be watched on Crunchyroll and Tubi, and the dub is currently free on YouTube. But Part 3 ending afterwards, Team S decided to push Lupin in a new direction, but at a great cost, with the Fuma Conspiracy. Released in 1987, the Fuma Conspiracy is Lupin's first OVA, and has a plot that focuses more on Goemon than the others, involving his marriage and dedication to protecting his clan's ancient treasure from evil. Also ninjas, because this was the 80s. But the OVA itself is infamous in Japan for its controversial production. You see, TMS was in a bit of a tight spot, financially speaking. The voice cast was getting expensive, and there wasn't much in the budget for Team S to make a great looking OVA while retaining the cast. So Team S was left with a choice. Either fire the old voice actors and spend most of the budget on better animation with a newer, cheaper cast, or rehire the cast and settle for simple animation. TMS chose the former, and the fan base exploded. They didn't take this change kindly at all, even sending hate mail to replacement voice actors. Worse, due to severe miscommunication, Lupin's voice actor, Isao Yamada, cut ties with Monkey Punch and was sadly died in 1995 without reconciling with him. Unfortunately, the controversy in the OVA's limited release resulted in a film conspiracy flopping at the box office. But with all this controversy and hearsay out of the way, do I still recommend this OVA? Yes, I do. The money for the animation was put to great use, with this OVA looking almost as good as Cagliostro. It's also a pretty good film, too. And today, replacing the voice actors for Lupin is really nothing special, especially since the Japanese voices will either be replaced due to stuff like age and death. Even the new Japanese voices are way better than the OVA's English dub, which is recorded in North Carolina with a no-name cast. But sadly, this movie is currently out of print and can only really be watched free on YouTube subtitled. Now, at this point in time, Team S is suffering from ravenous Lupin fans and financial turmoil. How do they get back into the fan base's graces while keeping the franchise alive? Simple. You move to television with the Lupin yearly specials. The yearly specials are TV movies that are produced at a much cheaper cost compared to theatrical movies and OVAs. And because of that, they were able to obtain the original voice cast and satisfy fans. The first TV special was 1989's Bye Bye Liberty Crisis, which was a smash hit in ratings. So Team S decided to make these TV movies a yearly deal, meaning a new Lupin movie every year. Multiple animation studios and writers were involved to deliver the yearly takes on the Lupin game, with several different characterizations and art styles depending on who worked on the movie. And they currently showed no signs of stopping. Do I recommend all of them? No! A lot of US specials just aren't very good. A lot of them are very formulaic, have a lot of the same plots and tropes, and have very inconsistent animation and writing quality, needs to be farmed out to several different studios. Plus, with over 30 plus years of movies, which means literally like 30 plus movies, we'd be here all day if I were to cover every single one of them. So I'll give some of the ones I do recommend, because they're not all that bad. The first I recommend is Tokyo Crisis. It's a good movie, has an interesting story, and a greater focus on Zenigata, which makes for a fun time. Island of Assassins, my personal favorite, is a slick and stylish flick that has some solid action scenes and the darkest story out of all the new specials. If you're into 90s anime, this one's for you. And also like the recently released Prisoner of the Past, which has a fun story, good jokes, and some nice animation. The first two can be found on Tubi, and all three can be found on Prime Instant Video. Now when it came to the 90s, we got primarily yearly specials and two big movies. The first was Parable of Nostradamus, released in 1975. It's a pretty decent movie that has a nice plot, a terrific third act, and fantastic animation done by people who worked on Tiny Toons and Batman the Animated Series. And the second was Dead or Alive, released in 1996. Directed by Monkey Punch himself, because they literally had no other options. Dead or Alive is one of the wildest, darkest installments in the franchise, and I totally recommend it. It's very stylish and really cool. Though, sadly, it would be the last theatrical Lupin movie for a long time, as TMS are primarily focused on producing the yearly specials. Unfortunately, both films can only be found legally on DVD. No streaming for the both of them. The 2000s, though, were a complete dry spell for Lupin, mainly consisting of yearly specials of decreasing quality and diminishing ratings. It wouldn't take until 2010 until a new Lupin series was released, an entirely new take nonetheless. The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. Fujiko is a 13-episode series that sought to give Fujiko not only her own spin-off, but her own alternate origin story of how she met the Lupin gang, here being the key to the gang's formation. Airing in 2012, this series is actually the first female-driven work in the Lupin franchise. Having been directed by frequent Shinichiro Watanabe collaborator Sayo Yamamoto, with Black Butler writer Mari Okada serving as series writer. Meanwhile, the character designs and animation were held by Takeshi Koike of Redline fame. The series sought to give the franchise a different look and feel, being far more darker, grittier, and more sexually driven compared to the previous installments. It is ultimately a cross between the original Lupin manga, Cowboy Bebop, and Revolutionary Girl Utena. Do I recommend this one? Yes, actually. It's a very unique take on Lupin that isn't afraid to go to dark places, while maintaining the core aspect of the franchise, plus it has some great animation. by far the darkest anime in the franchise. I can't really recommend it to anyone getting into Lupin, since it's so different from the other installments. You get the most enjoyment. I feel like you get the most enjoyment if you know who these characters are. But if you're curious, this one is still a really good watch. The show can be currently streamed on High Dive, and the show's success was spawned a series of spin-off movies set in the show's world, which include the likes of Grave of Daisuke Jigen, Goemon Ichikawa's Ray of Blood, and Fujiko Mine's Lie, all of which are terrific and worth checking out. But Fujiko's success would help give Team Ness the confidence to create a new, official Lupin anime series after many decades of absence. Alright, Lupin the Third, The Italian Adventure, aka Part 4, aka Blue Jackets, aired in 2015. The series basically involves Lupin and the game traveling Italy to steal everything they can. Unlike the previous shows, Part 4 has a mixture of episodic and serialized storytelling. There's an overarching plot involving the Italian government cooking up something sinister, but we also have Lupin spending each episode trying to steal whatever priceless treasure he can get his hands on, with several recurring characters and villains appearing throughout the series, which will run for a total of 26 episodes. I do recommend Part 4? Oh yes, I do. Part 4 is some solid episodes, some really good animation, and a great use of Italy, taking advantage of the country's history and culture to create a very engaging story, while also giving us some nice character-focused episodes. Jigen and Goemon both get an episode that spotlights them, and they're the best episodes of the series for how different they are. Part 4 would also help us to introduce serialized storytelling into all future Lupin shows. And because of that, I think Part 4 is a great introduction to the series after watching Momo Cagliostro. It's a show that doesn't go on forever and can be watched from start to finish no problem. No fat or awful filler in between, just a good time all around. The show can be found on Crunchyroll, Amazon Prime, and High Dive. Part 4 is a plan to help give TMS the confidence to start making more Lupin series every few years, such as Lupin Part 5. Aired in 2018, the plot mainly centers around the Lupin gang tackling France to acquire whatever treasure they can find, so long as they can make it through whatever assassins, terrorists, or social media moguls stand in their way. To one-up Part 4, Part 5 has 4 interconnected story arcs that ultimately deal with Lupin's position in the modern era, with things like smartphones, the internet, and social media make it harder for thieves like Lupin to stay hidden, especially when he's targeted by other criminals who want his head, plus all the unwanted attention by the general public. The series lasts 24 episodes. And do I recommend Part 5? Oh, for sure. The story arcs are very well done. Even the filler in between the arcs is entertaining, taking the time to give us some nice character-driven stories that can be pretty funny. The show primarily deconstructs the character of Lupin by making him out to be an old-fashioned character in a rapidly aging and technology-driven world, while at the same time stating that despite everything, Lupin's still Lupin, the world's greatest thief who loves tackling the hardest of challenges, making it one of the only anime that has a very well-written use of modern-day technology and social media that doesn't come across as pandering. Plus, the series gives us some solid new characters and some great action. Part 5 can be currently found on Hulu, Crunchyroll, Tubi, and High Dive. But with the Lupin hype increasing, Team Ness decided to give Lupin a new theatrical movie after all these decades. But this wouldn't be any ordinary movie. This time Lupin would go into the third dimension with Lupin the First. Oh, they got that right. Released in 2019, Lupin the First is entirely animated and CGI, making it stand out from everything else before it. The story itself was heavily inspired by Castle Cagliostro, with Lupin trying to help a young female thief uncover the secrets of his own grandfather, Arsene Lupin I, which the Nazis is also trying to uncover for their own nefarious purposes. Do I recommend Lupin the First? Yeah, I do. The animation is stunning, reminiscent of the squash and stretch of the Hotel Transylvania movies that managed to capture the franchise style perfectly. I know CGI anime tends to get a bad rep thanks to the likes of Berserk 2016 and X-Arm, but this movie looks just so good. A lot of effort was put into this. And it helps that the story is a celebration of Lupin's 50-plus year-long career that honors the character's legacy. The movie can currently be found on Hulu, YouTube, and Amazon Instant Video. Now, after the year that was 2020, Lupin would get yet another new series. Lupin Part Part 6. Aired in 2021, the series involves Lupin traveling to London to do the same stuff he's been doing for decades. Like the previous series, this one has story arcs, but just 2 this time. The first half of the series has Lupin going up against the descendant of Sherlock Holmes, with Lupin having been framed for the murder of John Watson. The second half involves Lupin tackling a female thief who stole a special treasure from his grandfather, with Lupin uncovering a large conspiracy in the process. Like Part 5, Part 4 ran for 24 episodes. Do I recommend Part 6? I hate to say it, but no, I don't. To me, the story arcs are very lacking in action or anything interesting, and some of the episodes just have very glacial pacing. The filler episodes in particular lack anything exciting, little action or interesting stories and characters. Most of them involve boring conversations with not much thievery, and the endings tend to be very anticlimactic and uninspired. And unlike the previous seasons, the show doesn't make that good use of its London setting. Aside from Sherlock Holmes, nothing about the city's history or culture is used for anything creative. But for the next installment, Team S decided to go for a more unique and nostalgic approach. Yes, Lupin Zero. Released in the tail end of 2022 and concluded in the beginning of 2023, literally just last Saturday. Lupin Zero is a 6-episode O&A, a miniseries released exclusively online that details an alternate origin story for Lupin, this time going through his childhood as an up-and-coming thief. Taking heavy cues from the original manga and Part 1 anime, Lupin Zero involves a young Lupin teaming up with a young Jigen as the two go on crazy misadventures, going up against numerous criminals. All while Lupin figures out his true place within his family crime tree. While he become a hardcore thief under the orders of his grandfather, will he become a thief like his grandfather, or a normal citizen under the orders of his dad, Lupin II? And you heard that right, we finally get a good look at Lupin II in this anime. Do I recommend Lupin Zero? Yes, I do actually. Compared to Part 6, this one's actually a nice change of pace, serving as not only a cool prequel that plays to the franchise's formula, but also a nice tribute to Lupin's origins. Now, whether a newbie can start with this one is a weird case, since on one hand, it's a prequel, you don't have to worry about the extra baggage, but on the other hand, fans of Part 1 and the manga get the most enjoyment because of all the callbacks and references. So whether or not you want to start with this one is honestly your call. Lupin Zero can currently be found on High Dive. And that wraps up our Lupin journey. Now, in summary, before we go, let's briefly go over how one should get into Lupin. Start with Mystery Mamo and Cagliostro. These 2 movies, they're the best movies in the franchise. Aside from Part 1's really good, but these 2 are really good. Then you head into either Part 4 or Part 2, whichever one you feel like. If you want a more shorter, episodic, the shorter, serialized tape, then Part 4 is the way to go. But if you want something fun, like very lighthearted, just like pick one, doesn't matter what you watch, pick Part 2. And then once you're done with that, move on to Part 5. But then again, this is just my list. Lupin is such an open-ended series that anybody can start anywhere they want and still enjoy it. And with the series continuing to grow and produce countless more content, who knows if this list will even remain consistent? Now, since we've reached the conclusion of this panel, without further ado, take it away, Goemon.
As you guessed by now, this is